Thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. Happy Monday. So it is a National Education Board, a prestigious one. It's the Commission on Presidential Scholars. And because this is an actual presidential commission, it needs presidential appointees. And the Trump administration this month needed a new one, needed a new presidential appointee to this presidential commission. And they found the perfect guy. He's a big Trump donor. He writes articles for the conservative blog Newsmax, like this one, Trump's new tax code will save the economy. He also runs a couple of private sort of pseudo-educational companies that will allow you basically to buy certifications, which appear to be academic qualifications if you squint and maybe if you've had a few drinks. Here's the Denver Post, quote, George Mentz owns the Global Academy of Finance and Management. He was previously the CEO of a similar company, the American Academy of Financial Management. Both companies award certifications, allowing applicants to add an alphabet soup of titles after their names. For a fee, for example, paid to this guy, he would send you something that describes you as an accredited life coach, or a certified political scientist, or a master Islamic financial specialist. You can choose from more than 100 other titles. You just pay this guy, and then he sends you a piece of paper giving you the title. According to George Mentz, this Trump donor, this new appointee to this national prestigious education commission, buying one of these certifications from his company, quote, makes you one of the next generation of global leaders. Oh, yes, because you pay him $378 and he gives you a piece of paper calling you a certified political scientist. Clearly, you are ready for your turn on the global stage. Clearly, you are one of the next generation of global leaders. But this guy, Mr. Newsmax blogger, fake certifications by mail, I mean, as impressive as his record is in the field of education, I think the real attraction for this presidential appointment, for him getting a presidential appointment to this prestigious federal education board, must have been his long list of books. Here's one of the books that he has authored. And this is not the whole book. This is just the title. This is a book he wrote in 2013. But the whole title is here. It is, and I quote, Success Magic, the prosperity secret to win with magical spiritual power, how to grow rich, influence people, protect your mindset, and love yourself like a warrior using timeless abundance secrets. That's the title. Now, on the odd chance that that seems like that book might be confusing, how do you love yourself like a warrior using timeless abundant secrets while also using magical spiritual power to grow rich and influence people? And what does that have to do with success magic? And why isn't there a comma between them? I mean, don't worry. It sounds a little confusing, but he has a little tick in his books, which is that he puts the really good parts, the really important parts, in all capital letters. So the Denver Post was reviewing this guy's literary output in the light of his new presidential appointment, and they were able to zoom right in on the bottom line thesis of that book with the 29-word title, not including the ampersand. And the bottom line thesis of the book, according to the Denver Post, is this, quote, when a person stops struggling and initiates, all capital letters, alchemy or magic, comma, something happens. Got it? The Denver Post profiled George Mentz as a homegrown Colorado presidential appointee. They highlighted not only his awkward business history of handing out fake academic titles for money, but also the quite amazing list of books that he has to his name. Because it's not just that one. I mean, let me just show you a little bit of a list. These are all by the same guy, Trump donor, just appointed to a federal education board. Yes, he is the author of the big one, right? Success Magic, the prosperity secret to win with magical spiritual power, how to grow rich, influence people, protect your mindset, and love yourself like a warrior using timeless abundance secrets. That's one. But he is also the author of The Illuminati Secret Laws of Money, The Wealth Mindset Manifesto. Also, the Illuminati Handbook, The Path of Illumination and Ascension. Also, the 50 Laws of Power of the Illuminati. Also, 100 Secrets and Habits of the Illuminati for Life Success. And also, I don't know how he finds the time, but the same year he wrote the Success Magic book with the 29-word-long title about the alchemy and something happening. That same year, he also wrote a whole nother different book that's called The Abundance Bible and the Secret Powers of Manifesting Wealth, Health, and Peace of Mind. Man, has this guy got it all figured out. When he started donating money to the Donald Trump for President campaign, the campaign responded by naming him to an economic board that advised the campaign. Now that Donald Trump, surprise, is actually the president of the United States, they've gone back to the well. And so now the author of The Illuminati Secret Laws of Money and all those other books, now he is a presidential appointee to the Federal Presidential Commission on Presidential Scholars. Because why not? And whether or not you are worried about the Presidential Commission, the Commission on Presidential Scholars, and what Donald Trump might be capable of doing to such an education board, when it comes to him choosing his high-level appointees for various jobs in the administration, there would appear to be some continuity in the selection process between how he has found personnel for boards like that and how he has chosen, like, his top advisor on China, which is an even more important job. I mean, it's easy to forget now, but when Trump announced he was running for president in the first place, kind of his whole argument for why he was running was about China. It was supposedly the most important thing to him. During the campaign, the multimedia team at the Huffington Post website cut together an epic sort of endless supercut of what Trump was talking about every day on the campaign trail, every time he opened his mouth to explain why he decided to run for president.
Let's say China. 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 You go over to China. 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 You take China.
China.
China. I love them. China. 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 I have to have my China.
That was from 2015. That was the way he started to run for president. That was his whole stated reason for running for president. I have to have my China, 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 right? Then he becomes president, and believe it or not, he appoints a top advisor to the president of the United States on the issue of China, China, China. I have to have my China. And for that job, which you would think would be very important to him to get the right person, he picked somebody who reportedly had never been to China, who does not speak Chinese, who has never formally studied China. How does he pick this guy to be his top advisor on his supposedly top issue? Well, the guy did write some books with some amazing titles that you could imagine perhaps maybe appealed to the president's sense of branding on this issue, if not his deep appreciation for actual expertise. Because Peter Navarro's books on China are called things like Death by China, Confronting the Dragon, also The Coming China Wars. Oh, that's good enough. Look at that. Death by China. Get me that guy. It sounds awesome. Please tell me that's a movie already. I mean, that's how we got our nation's top presidential advisor on China. Now, in looking at his literary output on China, the Chronicle of Higher Education recently reported that Peter Navarro appears to have invented a fake source, a fake, quote, China muse, for his belligerent, somewhat crazy books about China. In Peter Navarro's books, he repeatedly cites somebody named Ron Vara, who says very quotable anti-China things in Mr. Navarro's books. Things like, you've got to be nuts to eat Chinese food. Well, the Chronicle of Higher Education was first to document it, but this repeatedly cited China expert for the president's top advisor on China is a figment of Peter Navarro's own imagination. It's his imaginary friend. The name Ron Vara, this guy who he keeps citing as a China expert, is actually an anagram of his own last name, Navarro. Since he has been caught citing himself as a fake China expert in his own books about China, Mr. Navarro has tried to pass this off as a hilarious in-joke that everybody should just get over. And who among us does not enjoy made-up sources in books as a source of inherent hilarity? The problem with this line is that the people with whom he was co-authoring his books apparently didn't know that Peter Navarro's source was made up. Quote, one of Mr. Navarro's co-authors was unaware of Ron Vara's fictional status. Ron Vara is quoted in Seeds of Destruction, which was written in 2010 by Navarro and Glenn Hubbard, a professor of finance and economics at Columbia University. Asked via email whether he knew that Peter Navarro had inserted a fictional character into their book and whether doing so was okay with him, Professor Hubbard replied, quote, "No and no." As in, no, I didn't know he was making up sources for our book, and no, I'm not okay with it. And that's just bizarre. I mean, it's just funny and it's weird and it's... But in the Trump administration, with their hiring policies and their excellent vetting, that is who you're going to get as the top China advisor to the president, right? Get me the death by China guy. And he has now become the actual architect of a real trade war that our country is waging with China. And as a result of that, U.S. manufacturing is in an actual recession for the first time in years, and the federal government is giving direct bailout payments to U.S. farmers to compensate them for the economic devastation the China trade war has caused U.S. farms. Those payments to U.S. farmers at this point are already more than double what the U.S. government paid out during the Great Recession to save the whole U.S. auto industry. But don't worry. Peter Navarro has it all in hand. He knows what he's doing. Ron Vara told him not to eat the chow mein. And so, you know, death by China. We're confronting the dragon. So it's all nuts. But now, this particularly nutty and destructive area of presidential policymaking and presidential personnel looks like it might potentially be the next page in the Donald Trump impeachment inquiry. The impeachment proceedings, as you know, sparked by a whistleblower complaint from inside the intelligence community, an intelligence professional who had reportedly been detailed to the White House, raising the alarm first internally and then through whistleblower channels that the president had been, quote, using the power of his office to solicit interference from a foreign country in the 2020 U.S. election, including, among other things, pressing a foreign country to investigate one of the president's main political rivals. That was the whistleblower complaint. There was a concerted effort within the White House and at the Justice Department, even, it appears, at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, to try to kibosh this whistleblower's complaint, to keep it quiet, keep Congress from getting it. Nevertheless, the complaint gets to Congress. The allegation is totally explosive. When it emerges that the whistleblower's complaint hinges on a July 25th phone call between President Trump and the president of Ukraine, President Trump initially asserts that the call was, in his words, perfect. There was nothing wrong with the call. The White House, to back that up, then released the official notes from that call. The White House notes of that call confirm everything the whistleblower said and worse. I mean, there in black and white is President Trump demanding from Ukraine an investigation into one of his domestic political rivals. I mean, it was almost like the president didn't realize that was bad with all the things he's gotten away with. Oh, this one is bad? This is what I'm going to get in trouble for? The president sort of had to pivot from the call was perfect. The president's supporters, particularly members of Congress, initially tried to kind of spin the White House notes on that call, tried to kind of reimagine what happened there. His supporters were like, okay, we know what it looks like, but you're reading it wrong, right? You're reading too much into it. He's not really literally asking for Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. That's fake news. That's Democratic spin. In response to that pushback, reporters naturally just asked the president, you know, sir, are your supporters right? Is that not what you meant? What did you want to happen there, sir? Were you asking for an investigation of the Bidens?
What exactly did you hope Zelensky would do about the Bidens after your phone call? Exactly.
Well, I would think that if they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Bidens. It's a very simple answer.
Oh, well, there goes the initial defense that he was not asking for an investigation into the Bidens. Mr. President, what did you hope Zelensky would do after your phone call? Well, if they were honest about it, I'd hope they'd start a major investigation into the Bidens. And the president just admits it. Yes, that's what I was trying to get in that call from that foreign country, an investigation into the Bidens. Why? Is that bad? Then, in the next breath, he compounds the problem in what is turning out to potentially be a very important way.
It's a very simple answer. They should investigate the Bidens, because how does a company that's newly formed, and all these companies, if you look at, and by the way, likewise, China should start an investigation into the Bidens.
Oh, China should start an investigation into the Bidens, too. Yes, the thing you are impeaching me for, asking Ukraine for an investigation of the Bidens, yes, I did that. We've now provided you written official White House evidence of that, and I'm reiterating it here on the White House lawn. Also, if you would like to impeach me for asking China to do the same thing, I'm going to go ahead and commit that crime right here, right now in front of all of you. Microphones all still on? Okay, ready? Here goes. I would also like China to investigate the Bidens. Now, where do I sign? The only defense at that point for the president's supporters would have to be a creative one. Republican Senator Marco Rubio sort of took the lead on that, arguing that President Trump couldn't possibly have just asked China to investigate Joe Biden, too. He cannot have done that. It must have been, he was kidding? Let's say he was kidding.
But you're one of the loudest critics of China and its human rights abuses. I mean, is it okay for him to ask to say that?
I don't think it's a real request. I think he did it to gig you guys.
He didn't mean that. He was telling a hilarious joke to gig you guys. To make you giggle? I don't know. To gig you? I don't know. The White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, also got asked about it. This was the White House briefing where Mulvaney went ahead and confirmed that there was a quid pro quo demand to Ukraine that they do these investigations that President Trump was demanding if they wanted to get their U.S. military aid. And then, of course, after that, he pretended that he hadn't said that at all. Part of the reason he ended up dancing himself into that box at that press conference, though, is because he wasn't just asked about Ukraine at that press conference. He got asked the unanswerable question about how he could possibly explain that Trump was also asking for China to do it as well.
Can you clarify, and I've been trying to get an answer to this, was the president serious when he said that he would also like to see China investigate the Bidens? And you were directly involved in the decision to withhold funding from Ukraine. Can you explain to us now definitively why? Why was funding withheld?
Sure, let's deal with the second one first.
Let's do. You know what? Of those two, I'd rather deal with me being directly involved in a quid pro quo arrangement of illegally withholding congressionally appropriated money from a foreign ally in exchange for domestic political help for the president. I would actually rather talk about that than whether he really meant it when he committed the same crime out loud on the lawn when it comes to China. Can we deal with that one after? The chief of staff, needless to say, never went back and specifically answered the part of that question about China. I mean, what would he say if he had? But CNN soon reported that the president's behavior about the China part of this really didn't appear to have been a joke or an effort to gig the press, whatever that means. CNN reporting that one of the call records that has been locked up inside the White House in a standalone high-security server that's usually reserved for highly classified material like covert action, one of those call records is from when President Trump called President Xi of China and, in fact, talked to him about Joe Biden. We still haven't seen that call record. It is reportedly locked up in that high-security server. Some Democrats in Congress have now called for those call notes to be released. Within a week of the president standing on the South Lawn and calling for China to investigate Joe Biden, we also had this intriguing reporting in the Financial Times. Quote, Trump advisor says China provided information about Hunter Biden. Quote, Michael Pillsbury, an informal White House advisor on China, said he received information about the business activities of Hunter Biden during a visit to Beijing in the same week that Donald Trump urged China to probe Mr. Biden. Quote, I got quite a bit of background on Hunter Biden from the Chinese, Mr. Pillsbury told the Financial Times. So President Trump is being impeached for asking Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. He then openly announces that he's doing the same thing with China. And we learn that he has apparently raised this already, not just on the White House South Lawn in front of everybody, but in a private call to the Chinese president, the records of which have now been hidden away. And now he has apparently dispatched one of his China advisors to go to China to collect information on the Biden family, whatever you can get from the Chinese government. I mean, that's what this guy is saying. Quote, I have got quite a bit of background on Hunter Biden from the Chinese. Right? Very explosive claim in the middle of this impeachment inquiry. Well, the same day that story appears in the Financial Times, that gentleman, that advisor to Trump on China, his name is Michael Pillsbury, he went on C-SPAN that day and he was asked about it. And this is like poetry. This is like every once in a while the news gods hand down not prose, but poetry. This was October 10th, the same day the Financial Times has run this story, right? Trump advisor says China provided information about Hunter Biden. That story's in the Financial Times. The guy this story is about goes on C-SPAN. He gets asked about it. Watch.
The Financial Times is quoted as you saying, I quote, "I got quite a bit of background on Hunter Biden from the Chinese," Pillsbury told the Financial Times.
I wonder what, I haven't spoken to the Financial Times for a month.
I wonder what, I haven't spoken to the Financial Times for at least a month. That's nutty. The Financial Times quoting me today saying I got background on Hunter Biden from China. That's insane. I haven't spoken to them for a month. Whereupon the reporter in question for the Financial Times instantly posts online the email he got the previous day from Michael Pillsbury saying exactly what he was quoted as saying in the story. Quote, "Mike Pillsbury denied on C-SPAN that he told me this, but here is the email exchange I had with him last night." And then he posts it from Mike Pillsbury to reporter at the Financial Times. And then there's the quote. "Actually, I got quite a bit of background on Hunter Biden from the Chinese." You know, do not deny things that you have done in general. God will know, right? So will your mother, wherever she is. But beyond that, I mean, definitely don't deny things that you have not only done, but you've put in writing less than 24 hours previous to your denial, especially if the thing that you're denying is something that you put in writing on the record to a reporter who then printed your words. It's not like reporters get these things from you and then they burn all their materials once they've published, right? But Mr. Pillsbury later got quite cagey about his claims that he had been dispatched to China to go collect information on Hunter Biden there after the president said out loud on the White House South Lawn that's what he wanted. He told the Washington Post when they reported on this development that, quote, White House officials had asked him not to disclose his conversations with the president. So now, right, impeachment proceedings against the president are well along their way to fruition. I mean, it was last week we got Ambassador Bill Taylor testifying that the White House withheld meetings and delayed and threatened to withhold military aid unless Ukraine announced bogus investigations to benefit the president domestically. Ambassador Taylor testifying that the president personally insisted on that. Just devastating testimony. Shortly thereafter, the Washington Post reporting that in addition to withholding meetings and military aid, it appears that the Trump administration also withheld trade assistance from Ukraine as well, part of this same pressure campaign to get these investigations out of Ukraine that the president thought would help him in his next election. Well, now today, the House has announced that they will take a vote this week establishing the format for how they're going to move forward in the impeachment proceedings. There's a fairly long list of depositions that are still to go for the behind closed doors witness testimony that they've been taking thus far, that part of the investigation. But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Intelligence Chair Adam Schiff are saying as of today that there will be a full vote in the House this week to establish the rules for the next phase of the impeachment proceedings, which will include not just closed door depositions, but also public hearings. Importantly, the New York Times is reporting that the rules that they're going to vote on will allow staff from the Intelligence Committee to conduct some of the questioning of the witnesses in these public hearings, which is a big deal because members of Congress, I love you, but doing the questioning with this lily pad hopping around in 5-minute chunks from member to member to member, where nobody can keep the line of questioning in their head and everybody's showboating and everybody keeps starting over from the beginning. Basically, that's a means of doing the questioning that elicits no information and that the public can't follow. But if instead, at these public hearings, you're going to have staff doing the questioning, with continuity, with subject matter expertise, knowing what they're asking about and why, well, that helps you actually learn things from witnesses. That's a large part of why the Watergate hearings were so revelatory for the public, honestly. And that's apparently what they are going to do here for the Trump impeachment. So it's going to go up to the Rules Committee for a vote first, which will then tee up a full House vote, we believe, on Thursday of this week. But in the middle of that, as the impeachment inquiry, which is like a month old now, as it starts, turning on the runway lights and planning its approach, now we've got this one gigantic dangling thread in terms of what exactly they're investigating and what is going to make up the articles of impeachment here. Because it really does appear like hiding in plain sight that the president did this not just with Ukraine, he did this with two countries. it is at least worth asking about that, because here, I'll show you. Here's Peter Navarro, a.k.a. Ron Vara, right? The author of Death by China, the architect of the president's China trade war, being asked about this very issue by CNN's Jim Sciutto. And watch how Navarro answers.
You don't have a right to know what happens behind closed doors in the administration. And the only way
I think the American people have a right to know if politics have entered trade negotiations.
Let me just answer this. I mean, the problem that I've seen over the last 3 years in Washington is that there's just too many stories that are reported based on anonymous sources that inevitably get it wrong. So, I don't know, do we want to spend this time doing that?
I'm asking you a direct question. Did you bring up investigating the Bidens as part of the negotiation?
In my judgment. Okay?
Why not?
You're asking me what happens in the White House behind closed doors?
Well, I'm asking if politics have entered the internet, the sphere of international relations here.
Jim, ask and answer.
Asked repeatedly, but not answered at all. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. And as the House starts to land these impeachment proceedings, as they round at least first base and head towards second, it is starting to seem like this really might be Chapter 2. Country 2 at least. Article 2, maybe? Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.